wrote a paper, and if it's helpful, I can send a link of it to Julie for your website. A couple of years ago, when I was at the Texas Public Policy Foundation, I wrote a massive paper on looking at funding in K through 12 education. What are we doing with our spending, and what's our achievement? And so I'm going to give you just a couple facts. So if you want to go ahead and pull up the PowerPoint. So I looked at trends, and I compared the United States to the 30 developed countries. They're called the OECD countries, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. Yes? So, big surprise, the U.S. spends more money on public education than the average of all the 30 developed nations as a whole. The U.S. spends a higher percentage of our education spending on things other than teachers, and we spend a smaller percentage on teacher pay. We also spend more on buildings and facilities. So you can look at first bullet. We spend 7.4% of our GDP on public education spending as a country, and the average of all the 30 developed countries spends 6.1%. So that's pretty significant that we spend more. When you look at where we're spending, we're not spending it on teacher salaries, we're spending on other things, and we're spending it on buildings and facilities. Okay, what are we getting? So our achievement, if you look at where we are in math and science, there is a test called the PISA, and students in all of the developed countries at age 15 take it, and it looks at math and science. We are ranked 24th in science and 25th in math out of the 30 countries. We are hiring more non-teachers than we are teachers. If you go back, again, I did a lot of research way back. So in 1949, the ratio of teachers to non-teachers was for every 7 teachers, there were 3 non-teachers. And then in 2007, for every teacher, there's a non-teacher. So you can see that if we're talking about what's going on in the classroom with the students, we're not hiring more teachers, we're hiring more other staff. Also, we're hiring more staff at a higher percentage than we are growing the students. So, this is troublesome. I have a movie clip for you to see. This is a documentary called The Cartel. It looks at spending in New Jersey. The director of the movie, Bob Bowden, actually compares the education establishments in New Jersey to the mafia. That's why it's called The Cartel. It's a very hard-hitting film. I highly recommend it. If you have not seen it, it is available on Netflix. We're going to look at a little section on spending in New Jersey, and they are the highest spending state in the country. I did some research for the schools around here so that you would be able to compare some of the New Jersey figures. So we go back to the PowerPoint. I looked at Grapevine, Colleyville ISD, Keller ISD, and Carroll ISD. Go to the next slide. Go to the next one. Okay. So the average cost per student in Texas is $11,543. So that's roughly what is spent on average in Texas per student per year. And that's total expenditure. So that includes the cost for their debt, for their buildings, their bonds. So in Grapevine, Colleyville ISD, I looked at a high school social studies class that has 22 students in it. And it costs $246,114 for that classroom. The teacher, the average teacher salary at that school is $53,000. So there's a lot of money that's going somewhere else. In Keller ISD, I looked at a science class that had roughly around 25 students. And the cost for that classroom was $292,006. And the average teacher salary at Keller High School is $52,000. And then Carroll was really high. Carroll ISD, this was the high school that's the 910 school. I looked at a math classroom that has 22 students. The average teacher salary is $51,000. And yet you look at the cost per classroom, it's $331,298. And I will say the cost per student at Grapevine, Colleyville, and Keller was around the state average. They were both around $11,000. At Carroll ISD, the cost per student is $15,059. That's per year, and this is last year's data. So, just showing you there's a lot of money. And this is not even talking about, when you talk about teacher salary, again, that's not talking about the cost of their pension or the cost for health insurance or things like that. So, okay, next slide. So, throw more money at the problem, which is going to be the solution that the school districts are going to give us, that the teacher groups, the teacher associations, the teacher unions, the PTAs, all of these organized groups in Texas, and I will say they are extremely organized. We have teacher unions in Texas. We may not be a unionized state. Our teachers cannot strike, but they are extremely well organized. There are 4 different teacher groups in the state, and they call their state reps. They call their state senators. They come to the Capitol. They attend rallies. They send postcards. They send emails. They send letters, and they pressure members saying, we need more money. We need more money. And so I want to give you guys another solution to that, and that would be a market-based approach, which is competition and education. And so I'm going to go through some different terms of what school choice is. This is a pretty positive term, school choice. It's very all-encompassing. It talks about various things. The word vouchers is very negative. How many of you have heard of vouchers before? Okay. In Texas, it is a very negative word. It has been tied to people who have put a lot of money into pilot voucher programs and who have tried to get certain folks elected. And so it's very negative. There is actually a program that is proposed right now. It's called Taxpayer Savings Grants. It's actually a voucher program, but they're calling it something different to try to have a more positive connotation. Another term is Education Tax Credit Scholarships. And that is also a voucher, but it's different. And vouchers and scholarships can focus on anybody. It can be a universal program, or it can be focused on a specific group, such as students with special needs, or students in the foster care system, or students who have a active military parent, or it can be low-income students. So around the country, there are a variety of programs. School choice could also be statewide open enrollment. And what that is that there would be no district boundaries. So let's say you live in one school district, but you're really close to the school district boundary, and you would like for your child to go to another school district down the street. Well, you probably would have to pay. So statewide open enrollment would say the state would take away all of the geographic boundaries and allow you to go to any public school in the state. Charter schools. Charter schools are public schools. When I asked earlier who knew about charter schools, I saw a lot of blank faces. Charter schools have been around in Texas since 1995. We have about 2% of all of the students in the state in charter schools. They are public schools. Your tax dollars fund them. They do not get facilities funding, and so that's why a lot of times you will see them in churches, in daycares, in strip malls. They are trying to be an alternative to the traditional public school, and so they're offering something different. There are some kinds of specialized charter schools. There is an autism school in San Antonio that's a charter school. Sometimes you'll see math and science charter schools. They're a math and science magnet trying to help you if you want to do math and science as your career. Focus on that. There are charter schools that focus on dropouts. There are charter schools that focus on college prep. So that's another option, and we actually have charter schools in Texas. We do not have vouchers, we do not have scholarships, we do not have statewide enrollment. Magnet schools are something that traditional ISDs already have. So you may have heard of a school with a waiting list, and you need to fill out an application, and you want your child to go because they have a specialized program in maybe math, or maybe they have a program in political science, or maybe it's an arts magnet. We tend to have those in some of the larger ISDs. So Houston ISD has some amazing magnet schools. Dallas ISD does. Those are also forms of choice. Again, you can choose to go to that, but there's not enough of them. There are typically waiting lists to get into magnet schools. And then virtual schools in Texas are relatively new, and that's where you could go entirely online and take all your classes, or you could just take a class here or there. Last point on school choice and vouchers is that we have 10 out of 11 gold standard studies that have looked at academic performance of students, comparing them in the traditional ISD, those who stayed in public school, and those who took the scholarship or voucher and left and went to a private school. And we have found 10 out of 11 of those studies significant academic gains for students. So I think the arguments against school choice are false, and I think we end up doing nothing if we're unwilling to find some type of solution.